To parse the parade of lies, truths, rumors, innuendo, and lore surrounding the UFO topic and how it all relates to the actual nature of things, this is Neon Galactic. I'm James Falk. Thanks for joining us. There are few UFO researchers who've been as dogged and rigorous in their research career as our guest today, author Greg Bishop. Through tireless research and unflinching tenacity, he's pierced the veil of deception and secrecy around UFOs and demonstrates that for all the mystery of strange craft in the skies, as much and more is generated by our own government and others to inexplicably dazzle the ufologists, to create the myth they subsequently deride. Bishop's book, Project Beta, the story of Paul Benowitz, national security, and the creation of a modern UFO myth, revealed to everyone the depths of the deception and highlighted the danger it presents to anyone not prepared to approach this mystery with discernment and care. This cautionary tale about how intelligence figures manipulated researcher Paul Benowitz and triggered his ultimate demise is a warning to all of us. Has it been heeded? Bishop has become known as a deep and creative thinker, someone who knows the games played and agendas served, yet still marvels at the possibilities inherent in the question, the wonders that may yet yield to diligent pursuit. He recognizes the game, but remains fascinated by the ontological possibilities inherent in anomalous experience. Through his essay collections, his blogs, his years as host of paranormal radio shows, his experience up close and personal with spies and info agents of the government, and more, Bishop has become one of the keenest minds on the subject, and someone whose wisdom may prove invaluable as folks continue to believe disclosure is coming soon, and that the government will finally tell the truth. We seek his wisdom and advice, and will explore what reality he believes may be at root in this mysterious universe. Welcome, Greg.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Cool. Thank you for that amazing introduction.
Well, this is a absolute pleasure of mine to talk to you. I've known about your work for a while, and as I have tried to equip myself with a little bit of discernment over the years, kind of shared with everyone back in the day about Paul Benowitz and Project Beta and all of those sorts of things. But let's start with how you first got into this topic. You've been around for a number of years, and you've seen a lot of the most recent developments come and sparkle in the sunshine as new data, and then sort of fall back by the wayside as more information comes up. How did you first get involved in this topic, and what about the UFO mystery so deeply intrigues you?
Well, there's a few ways to answer about the second part of that. The first part's easy. I just started reading books when I was a kid. Um, every book in the library on the paranormal I read. I have no idea why.
Mhm.
I've had UFO researchers say, well, maybe you were abducted or something. I said, well, if I was, I don't remember anything about it.
Yeah.
Um, I think I just honestly am interested in the subject. And I think maybe the reason why is, probably the reason a lot of people that haven't had an experience are interested in it. It is, it brings up so many questions. It brings up questions about perception and existence and how people deal with strange information. And also, I think I wrote an essay somewhere. I just said, the subject just sits out there outside the fence, just saying, we're here, we're here. And up to recently, a lot of people were just ignoring that it was out there saying, we're here, or it's here. I hate saying we because then I start assigning, on whatever it is, teleology to it, which I think there's something there.
Hmm.
I'm sure there is, but to put a name on it or any kind of face on it or whatever, unless you've had the experience yourself, to me is premature. So um, it's just, it's a fascinating subject. It's just it pulls you into areas you'd never thought you would be looking at. And my background's art history, so I'm looking at it in humanities art based uh, kind of way right now rather than a scientific based way, which is fine, but I'm not a scientist. And
Yeah.
also, I don't think science answers all the questions about this. It's a very holistic kind of thing, right and left brains.
It's interesting that you mentioned, that your background is in art history. I've spent some time with the Center for the Impossible, Archives of the Impossible, with Karen and Austin,
Yeah. Yep.
and we, her work is involved in sort of bringing the humanities to bear on the subject of ufology and other anomalous human experiences. And I wonder, what do you think the value of that is? Because for some people, it would say, it seems like the desperate pursuit of people in ufology is to prove the factual basis of all of this. But there is this mythic side, the symbolic side to the whole discussion. And I think that part of the real value of all of this is what we're being communicated through that symbology. But what are your thoughts? How can, engaging with it on that subjective side push the subject further?
Well, I think there is a false dichotomy between, especially in the UFO subject, between what's true, what's not, what's relevant, what's not. At the beginning of one of my lectures, I say, it looks, I think I might have stolen this from Valet, but what I say is, it looks like machines, so we treat it like machines.
Hmm.
But machines can't change your life in a minute. And that really intrigues me. If there's not a row of data that explains how somebody's life has changed in a few minutes, or they start a religion, or suddenly they question everything about their existence. Nothing else does that except possibly a psychedelic drug trip, or
Yeah. A
over a
near-death
long period,
experience or
an
something.
NDE. Yeah.
Yeah.
And these things are undeniably part of our existence, are undeniably part of the human experience. And myth and storytelling is the way we deal with things in life, to be able to integrate them, to accept them. I guess that's the same word. Um, and as to be able to move forward. What are what are rituals? They're marriages, whatever you want to, coming of age ceremonies like bar mitzvahs or whatever. These are all ceremonies. These are all related to a ceremonial, mythical part of our existence. It's there because hammering a nail in isn't the same as falling in love with somebody. They're different things, but they're just as important to us. And so a few years ago, I started a group with a few friends. We just called it the Right Brain Research Group. And we started talking about how can we look at this and this was like, I don't know, 10 years ago. How can we start looking at this from a, a humanities arts based um, perspective? What comes out of that? How does it affect people? What does it look like in history? What does it look like now? What does it look like in the future? And how do these stories we tell about ourselves and about what happened to ourselves tell us what, you know, where all, who we are? Because the thing is, different cultures react to this different ways. Different people react to this in different ways. It is a very individual thing. I've noticed
Yeah.
by talking to people. Nobody has exactly the same experience, and it can't be reproduced on demand. That's what science wants,
Yeah.
but it's definitely something that happens to people, and I'm pretty sure it comes from an external source that's not them.
Yeah.
But the thing is, all you're left with is what they're telling you about it. I Another lecture I start off, I said, when people are telling you what happened to them in a UFO experience, they're not telling you that what happened to them. They're telling you their memory of what happened to them. And so what affects that memory? There's so many things that affect our memory. We're not recording devices. We're not video cameras. And we have to take that into account when we're listening to people's accounts or recollections about what happened to them.
Yeah.
Um, so what kind of things does that bring up? How do we frame strange experience? How do we frame something that's never happened to us before? Because it has to be framed somehow, or you either forget it,
Hmm.
or you may have some sort of um, I hate the phrase ontological shock, but something that questions all your previously held beliefs about existence and why you're here and how you're supposed to react to things.
Yeah.
How do we deal with that? And I think that is a huge part of what the UFO subject is how do we react to it? What do we say about it? And what does that say about, the source of that? It's like looking at something through a lens where or a machine where you have little idea of how the machine works, but
Hmm.
you can see the result.
Yeah.
And if we understand how we remember things, how uh, what our culture and myths shape that, um, how the media that we've been exposed to shapes that, then we can maybe start to understand what the source of it might be. I don't know if we can ever get to that source. I'm really not sure about that, but we certainly can talk to people about what happened to them. And I think Valet has this analogy. He says, if you don't know what a furnace is, but if you turn up a thermostat and the heat gets, it suddenly gets warmer, you've got a you've got a relationship. There's a direct relationship between that thermostat and the heat going on.
Yeah.
So we may not know what a furnace is, but we do know what happens when you turn the thermostat up. So I think that analogy is well applied to the UFO subject in relationship to witnesses. And now that we can use AI to take huge amounts of data and look at um, you use voice analysis, not voice analysis, but text to
Pattern
speech.
recognition. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And now we can start looking at patterns in what people recollect, even though, somebody will say something 10, 15, 20 years apart, and we can start to draw possible connections between those things. And they may, not pointing to where do aliens come from, but how is it affecting people? And what does that tell us about the nature of whatever it is they're encountering?
Yeah.
And I can ramble and I will stop now.
No, I appreciate that. I could listen to you all day, and that's part of the joy of this. But it's interesting because Jeff Kripal and Karen Austin are in the process of doing a lot of that by taking like Whitley Strieber's letters that Anne had collated after the publication of Communion
Yeah, I
and
saw
John
them.
Mack's archives. Yeah. And they're going to try and put it in a database that will be accessed and analyzed by an AI and hopefully do exactly what you're talking about. And maybe through all of that, kind of peek through the noise of each individual, illusion and
Yeah,
find a deeper signal. And that's
yeah.
the
I know
the
Jeff and
hope.
Karen. I know
Yeah.
about that project. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. That seems to me like of all the things I've heard, one of the more hopeful, paths that we might take in the future. And seeing people on this disclosure train again and again and again, it kind of is. I mean, I have a part of me that hopes the government suddenly decides to come clean and say, well, this is what's going on. But even if they do, we're not going to be able to trust what they say because they've been obfuscating for so long that there's no way to know that even when they do say they're telling the truth, how much of the truth are we actually getting? What's the point of telling us that truth? So it's almost an irrelevant distraction because we'll not be able to take it to heart necessarily when it does happen. But I wonder about that. I mean, from someone who's had all of your experience, including dealing with people from the intelligence community actively manipulating your friends, and it sounds like you at times. I mean, just sort of Machiavellian stuff. What are your thoughts on where ufology is right now? I mean, we've made a lot of progress, but much of that progress is dependent on government sources and people who have affiliation with, secrecy in government. And does that make you trust it less? Where do you stand on where we are right now with the Lou Elizondos and Jake Barbers and all of that? Are you agnostic as to what they're saying, or what's your take?
That's a good word. Agnostic would be good.
I took it from you. It's in
Oh,
it
okay.
defies language.
Okay. I forgot I'd said that. I say this and I've been saying it for way before the New York Times article from in 2017, and it is disclosure is like asking the parent that always lies to you to tell you the truth just this one time, and if they don't tell you what you want to hear, they're lying.
Yeah,
And that's a strange loop. It doesn't make any sense. It's not it's not a way to get to any truth.
yeah,
Another thing, a researcher told me years ago and I take this to heart too, because I was asking about, you know, what's the reason for all this happening now? And he said, every time the government says something about UFOs, ufologists think it's about them. It's never about them. It doesn't have anything to do with them unless they're being used as some part of some operation because they're useful.
Hmm.
Other than that, I don't think there's any movement inside the government to tell the public what's going on. I think informally, yes, definitely there's people that know things and they really want people to know. Why wouldn't you? You know,
Yeah.
it's an amazing story. But it seems like every time there's some sort of announcement, it has, as I said, with this piece of advice, it has to do, it eventually turns out that it has to do with has something to do with national security or intelligence or, secrecy around projects or new hardware or something like that. And the other thing I say about UFOs is that they're the perfect Swiss Army knife for intelligence. You can use it for so many things, the subject,
Hmm.
to misdirect people or find out what people are interested in or say something and see who comes running.
Yeah.
It's a radioactive subject and people are really emotionally tied to it, which is, that discernment thing is part of that.
Yeah.
If you're emotionally tied to anything, I mean, you can see this with what's been going on in politics in the last 20 years. People are led around by their emotions
Yeah.
because politics is emotions, and very, very seldom is it does it have to do with any kind of detached analysis. I mean, it's hard to do that, but when you're talking about something that is so mysterious and so mercurical, assigning any one kind of story to it, I think, is a mistake. And for the most part, the government, or at least elements of the U.S. government, in this, I'm just talking about the United States. Other countries deal with it differently, obviously. But anytime they say something, I'm always suspicious about what the reason is for that. And I'm never suspicious about, are they going to tell us? I never have this hope, oh, finally they're going to tell us the truth, because that hasn't happened before. It's like the boy who cried wolf.
Yeah.
But um, that's why I listen, because I think it's interesting and there may be clues there, but I don't really take it to heart as anything that's going to be an answer. I spoke at MUFON, and one person during a quick Q&A, I think I was on a panel, but I was with a Q&A with two or three other people, and somebody asked, when are people going to realize that this is real, that this is an actual thing that's going on? And I said, why is that important? And people kind of went, what? And I said, why is it important to you to convince other people that this is going on? That's ego. That has nothing to do with the subject itself. I said, look, it may be a flippant thing I said, but the point of it was, do your work, and if it's good work, people will notice and things will progress from that. But just saying I want the government to tell me something I already know does nothing really. It's like I
Yeah.
said, it's just a loop of illogic to me.
Yeah.
But taking work that you do and that people you trust produce, and taking that into account and into you know your ideas about the subject, and then making your own decisions about it, as long as they're based in logic and open to, interpretate, not open to um evolution when new information comes in. I think that's the only way you can deal with this,
Yeah.
and then it stays interesting and you don't get backed into a corner saying, there are aliens from Zeta Reticuli, and then throw everything out that doesn't agree with that, which may be completely valid information, and totally keep everything that agrees with your emotional attachment to whatever that thing is. And it's kind of hard to do, but every time I see somebody say I've got the answer, it's just like they get a bunch of people around them, they all have the answer, and then most people don't pay attention to them
Yeah.
because it doesn't fit every scenario. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
So the only way you can look at this, I think, is to look at it on an individual basis and talk to other people and compare information and see what their opinions are, and have that, have that opinion be open, have your idea about the reality of it, whatever it is, be open.
Yeah.
Definitely there's something going on, but if you
Yeah.
make a decision about the nature of it, I think you've stopped learning. I mean, that's kind
Yeah.
of a life lesson too, but especially with the UFO
Absolutely.
subject.
Yeah. It's interesting because I mean it's even like with the UFO subject as a whole, like you can't take the UFO subject, in my opinion, in isolation. It's in a constellation of various phenomenon that all kind of hint at the same underlying, phenomenology, and they're all kind of telling us the same sorts of things. And what we talked about near-death experiences, we talked about, lots of paranormal events that happen, and they all seem to be indicating something about the nature of reality. And I think UFOs are a part of that conversation, but not the entire conversation. I wonder about your thoughts on that. I read in It Defies Language also that you have an occult background, or some occult training you mentioned at one point. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how those two things may intersect.
um the reason I think it intersects is because there's a lot of things that Western occultism does. I mean, I'm also interested in Eastern thought too. I mean, I'm very interested in Zen Buddhism, and I've been
Yeah.
following along with it for it's been part of my life for pretty much my entire adult life. But the funny thing, so has the esotericism.
Hmm.
And what the esotericism does, it does two things. One, and I think this is the main thing about Western occultism and esotericism, is it gives you context for your life. And two, I think it's one of the oldest self-help techniques in existence.
Yeah.
Um,
And
it
it's effective.
Yeah,
I mean, from my own experience anyway.
yeah. Israel Regardi, who has worked with Aleister Crowley, said people would come to him and say, I want to learn. I want to learn the Golden Dawn system or the Thelemic system or whatever. And his first piece of advice to them is, why don't you go to a psychologist or psychiatrist first and find out why you want to do this? Because if there's something wrong in the beginning, the occultism isn't going to do anything. It's just going to pump up your ego, and you can see this with a lot of people that are into this. I mean,
Yeah.
one of my jokes about people that get into this is their first question is, when do I get to smite? Basically, it's like, you know, that's the exact wrong reason to get into it. Just like getting into martial arts, I want to kick somebody's butt. It's like, that's not the reason for
Yeah.
the martial arts, is so that you don't have to kick somebody's butt.
Yeah. Exactly
it's
right.
it's basically a practice on yourself. I mean, I did tea ceremony for years, and I'm just starting Japanese. It's not really Zen archery, but it's the art of archery in Japan.
I love it, man. I love it.
It's so that you work on yourself
Hmm.
first.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like I said, this is so individualistic. If you know who you are and you know what you want, and your ego isn't attached to it so much, then maybe the UFO subject may begin to show you some things, which you might not be able to communicate to other people, but will be very significant to you. I mean, just studying UFOs to me is almost like an occult practice. You learn
Yeah.
things and you learn stories, you learn what has come before, you learn techniques, and and there's a large library of a massive library of literature on it and all that. So some good, some bad, probably mostly bad. But the thing is, that's what's that? Who was that? Heinlein's law, like 90% of everything is crap. Maybe it was 95. Um, Sturgeon's law, Theodore Sturgeon. And so I think the connection here is, if you know who you are, then you can have a little more pure idea about what you want to learn from the subject, and not get caught up in, is this true? Is it not? Is it not? Is the government going to say something or not? I Why do I need some authority who most people don't trust to tell me what I already believe? I mean, that's just it seems like a waste of time.
Yeah.
But if you can find out, you asked me at the beginning, why are you interested in this? And I said, I don't know. All I know is that it's standing out there saying reality is or the reality we say isn't what exactly what we think it is. And there's
Exactly.
vast areas of things we don't understand yet, like near-death experiences, like psychic phenomena and ghosts and things like that. We think it's dead people coming back, but there's no reason to believe that. Well, there's so many reasons to believe so many other things about it, or at least be interested in it. I hate the word believe.
Yeah.
There's so
Entertain those
many.
options at least. I
Yeah,
mean, like you have to,
exactly.
yeah. It's like with, I mean, you mentioned we were talking about Jeff Kripal. His whole thing, it's very similar to yours, where keep everything on the table, and don't get married to any particular explanation because as soon as you do, you begin to filter out the data to find things that only support what it is you want to believe. And all of this sort of goes back to me with Donald Hoffman. Are you familiar with his work?
Yep.
Yeah, he talks about how we've basically evolved to survive, and that all of our perceptions are geared to eliminate, mortal threat, but not to get any serious. Well, there you go. See, I love it. And I think that there's a great truth to the fact that we've evolved to be beings on this planet, and there is realities that are going on all around us that we have no clue exist, and no way potentially to even access. And so this arrogance that we've bred into ourselves over the past 100 years, and even before that, I mean, famously, like the 1890s, they were like, "Oh, we're only a few small developments away from completing physics, and then we'll understand the physical world and pat ourselves on the back." Well, then quantum physics suddenly emerged, and everything we thought we knew was torn apart and thrown on its head. I think that that's sort of the continuing human cycle. I think that'll keep happening as long as we're curious, because we'll always find things that undermine what previous ideas we've held. So that intellectual
Yeah.
humility is a huge part of all this, and I wonder if that's part of the point. Like if whatever the UFO phenomenon is, and if it has intention. Part of me wonders if that's just a humbling of the species to reopen us back to mystery.
It could be. There's something I do remember one thing I wrote in It Defies Language, and it was sort of, I think as I remember, I said, well, maybe the UFO subject, that whatever does it, whatever causes UFO reports, is just going along doing its thing, and we assign meaning to it. Just like we have wind. Well, there's no meaning in wind, it's just part of weather. But we fly kites with it, we generate electricity with it, we do, sail boats with it. So our relationship to wind is different than the wind just existing as itself. What does the ocean do? It just sits there, it has life in it and all that, but we use it to get around the planet. It was used for exploration a long time ago. We harvest minerals and kelp and all that from. So I think that the same thing is true with can be true with the UFO subject, is that the only thing we know about it is our relationship to it. That's the only thing we can kind of be sure of. Although I have seen, my friend Massimo Teodorani, the astrophysicist, he gave a lecture a couple months ago at the Society for UAP Studies, and he talked about, well, if it does have a propulsion system, it is physical. What would that look like? And that to me is fascinating because, like I said, there's a left and a right brain here. We can look at it as as a physical phenomenon. It has physical properties,
Yeah.
and maybe those physical properties are the ghost of whatever it might be. And if we can learn a little bit more about those physical properties, we might know a little bit more about, as I say, what causes UFO reports, because that's the main question, not what are UFOs. I think the
Yeah.
main question is what causes UFO reports.
That's a good
And
point because the experiencer is an integral part of the event. It's all, I mean, that is the event really, is what happens in their consciousness.
yeah, and the funny thing is, and Harley Rutledge discovered this, that when he tried to do a scientific examination of UFOs in the 1970s, I think it was, they took instruments. He took a bunch of graduate students. They took instruments up in airplanes. They had ground observers, and during a flap time in, I think it was, I don't remember, it was Ohio or Illinois. Um, they had all these instruments trained on this phenomena, and what happened was the phenomena would react to them looking at it. It wasn't just sitting there doing things like a, you know, Like what? Like a star or weather patterns or whatever you want to say that you can observe. It would actively react to what they were doing. Like they'd point an instrument at something, it would go away, or they would think about something, and then the phenomenon would react to the thought. That's not scientific. I mean, well, I guess it could be if you looked at it in a certain way, but it kind of upended their ideas about what they were looking at. It's like, are we watching pilots flying something? Well, the pilot, if they don't know you're there, what are they going to do? They're just going to keep flying.
Yeah.
Um, but whatever these things were, they would react consciously to their actions. And so many, Massimo told me the same thing. He says in some of his studies, he's the Hessdalen, they talk about this too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Things will happen, things will happen right after they turn off all their instruments. But they won't happen for 2 weeks while they have all their instruments on. When they finally say, screw it, they start packing up their instruments, bang, stuff shows up.
Yeah. It's like a trickstery kind of awareness of what you're thinking and doing that it shouldn't be aware of, which again, I mean, for me, ontologically, that all goes back to this idea, monism. Like somehow it's indicating to us that we are a part of some informational substrate that we're not aware of, and it is, and it's sort of toying with us in that regard.
Yeah. I think we may be toying with ourselves in a lot of cases. One of the essays I wrote in
Interesting.
there, I think, was how much of the UFO thing is coming from us? It could be close to 100%, or it could
How do
be
you mean? How do you mean?
our reaction to something,
Mhm.
our memory of something, and it was a little bit of a hyperbole. I don't think it's close to 100%, but I was trying to make a point. We have to include ourselves in the equation. You can't just say, this is the UFO subject or whatever it is, and this is us looking at it. It's so obvious to me that I'm getting emotional. It's so obvious to me that there's a very definite connection between what we think, what we write about, what we recall, how we study it, and the phenomenon itself. I called it a co-creation. I mean,
Yeah.
whatever is there is not us looking at something, and it's not the thing itself. It's our interaction with whatever that is,
Yeah.
informationally, mythologically, mnemonically, all these things, scientifically, even the science, which is supposed to be uh, entirely objective. You can't do that with UFOs. I mean, I
Yeah.
guess according to quantum physics, you can't do that with anything, but especially with UFOs. I mean, it's our interaction with it is what it is, not itself. We have no access to what actually causes UFO reports. All we have access to is our reactions to and our own information about it. It's
Yeah.
not. It doesn't let us ask questions. It doesn't perform on demand. It doesn't do any of those things.
It's
You
sort of
know.
like that. Sorry, as above,
It's
so
okay.
below. The phenomenon sort of blurs the lines between subjective and objective.
Oh yeah,
Like, I
totally.
mean,
I keep calling it a false dichotomy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it's interesting. Where does our influence from inside, our own minds end in the universe? Are we way more influential and causing things to happen that we are unaware of, or what's our relationship with that center principle that can actuate some of these things? Those are
Yeah.
deep, fundamental questions that the UFO topic really draws you toward, and that's part of the beauty of it, I think.
Yeah. And also why I don't think the government has any answers to anything, because as a unit, they're concerned about what perpetuates how it perpetuates itself, how it defends itself. So that's their idea about UFOs, which is always why it's, classed as, is it a threat or not? Well, that's how they think. That's,
Yeah, that's
of
their
course they're
job.
going to,
Yeah, yeah,
think like that. Whereas you get, a philosopher, they're going to start asking, why is it there? Why do we do this? How do we react? What, the kind of things we're talking about here. So it's really, I mean, I've got a T-shirt I sell. I should start printing them myself, but it says the UFO is a Rorschach blot, because it totally is. It is what a lot of things are, but especially, UFOs.
yeah.
And the funny thing is that what else is a Rorschach blot is art, and that's why I think it's very connected. I mean, there's a lot of clues in how we react to, create, interpret an artistic expression, as well as in the same way UFO is. I wrote something called "Are UFOs a Cosmic Art Project?" That's what I started thinking about. I think like in 2007 or 8 or something like that. I wrote that, and it was
Yeah,
the beginning of my thinking about, you know, what, if you were an artist and if you could elicit the reactions that people get from a UFO encounter, you'd be the most famous artist in the world.
exactly. It's succeeding at that task. I mean, basically inspiring sort of epiphanic like realization, and I mean, yeah, it's absolutely um, that
Yeah,
seems to be its task in a way.
yeah, which is why I'm
Love
interested
it.
in that interaction now. I mean, I've got a couple of friends I'm trying to help out with their UFO art, experiencer
Hmm.
type people, abductee type people, and because I think a nonverbal communication of what's going on when somebody has an encounter is probably way more important than a written account of it. The problem is with art, it starts to turn into interpretation.
Hmm.
But the thing is, you can't you can't categorize people's experiences, I don't think. And if they're communicating it through art, I think that you will get just you will get an individual reaction to that in the same way they had their own individual reaction. And in the way that art communicates, you can say something to the artist, you know what that brought up in me or it reminded me of, and you'll tell them something. And the artist will say, I didn't even think of that. That makes a whole lot of sense to me. And it may help them with integrating their own experience. And plus,
Yeah.
they're communicating some of that to you non-verbally in a way that, they couldn't just describe to you. I mean, art and poetry and all that is attempt to describe things that can't be described in words. Well,
Yeah.
poetry is, but using words to describe something that can't be described in words. Then you move into the visual arts, and it's the field is wide open. Um, I think I used the example of Kubrick and David Lynch, who both would not describe to you what they were thinking. In the case of Lynch, he said, I don't know what I was thinking. I was just doing what I thought was good for whatever. I was producing an artwork, and this is what I was supposed to do next. I don't know why I did it.
He was a clear channel.
Yeah,
You know what I
exactly.
mean?
But the thing is, and he would absolutely refuse to tell people what he was thinking. He says, I don't even know what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And I think 90% of the time he was actually telling the truth about that. He didn't know what he was thinking. The meaning came out afterwards. He was just letting the whatever was going on direct what he wanted to say and do and show and how he wanted to present it.
Yeah.
Um, but the thing is, funny, he and the writer Mark Frost of Twin Peaks, huge UFO
Yes,
fanatics.
I know, and I've read the book. There's a book about it, and there's just a lot of buried occult stuff within the series. It's just a mind blower. But yeah.
Yeah, I've got a tarot set, a Twin Peaks tarot set
Oh,
that
that's
somebody
so
said.
cool.
It's so amazing. But the point is that I think this is open to interpretation to the degree that art is open to interpretation, and that's why I see these parallels. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm writing about it right now, but the thing is, every time I think about something, the the field of what I'm trying to write about gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and I have to actually pull it in because I see so many of these parallels
Yeah.
coming up. And and it's taken me into, I've got books on cognition and the visual system, and what does the human nervous system do with visual input, and how do people remember things, and how does trauma affect memory. And
Yeah.
these are all, I think, part of that soup of what is the UFO, and what causes UFO reports, and how does it affect us. And that's fascinating to me. What the government knows about UFOs, I don't really care about anymore, because I don't think they know much more than we do, except probably a bit more details.
Yeah.
Um,
And maybe
I
more hard evidence of sightings or whatnot, but not
yeah, I
necessarily the nature of it.
yeah, and what do you say about somebody that says, I've seen this, I've seen that, I've seen hardware, somebody told me? It's like, well, that's great, but for some reason we're never able to see it. So what are we supposed to make of that? And who knows what you saw?
Yeah.
Maybe something was shown to you to make you freak out. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe there's technologies that people don't know about, and people have been exposed to that, and they're perfectly happy to let people think it's UFOs. I do not know. This is pure speculation,
Yeah.
but it's just such, like I said, it's such a Swiss Army knife. Just use it for whatever. And I don't know what's going on right now. I don't know why that article came out. I don't know why Lou Elizondo is doing what he's doing, but I'm pretty sure all those people are doing things because somewhere somebody or some group says we should be doing this right now. And I'm absolutely certain it's a mixture of truth and direction. I mean,
Hmm.
I know, I'm pretty sure those pilots saw what they saw off the Nimitz and in other places. I talked to one of the pilots. I talked to Alex Diedrich for a couple hours,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
They're telling the truth.
yeah,
Yeah.
I have no doubt that she saw something extremely strange. I have no doubt that Kevin Day saw something extremely strange on his radar apparatus. And then also when he said he ran up to the bridge and actually looked through binoculars and saw the object, but it was so far away. He said there was something there. I don't know what it was. And in fact, he wasn't even near them, and it affected his life very deeply.
Yeah.
It wasn't even a close encounter, because usually when people, the closer somebody is to whatever the object is, the more they're affected. The
More
more,
transformational. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. You just see something flying through the sky, you're like, oh my God. But if something lands in front of you and something comes out of it, or for whatever reason, or you go up to it, that's going to be way more transformational. So there's like an idea about to the proximity to whatever the phenomenon is and how it affects you. I guess, obviously it's a direct relationship, but the thing is, what is that relationship? Why are people's,
Yeah.
ideas and lives change? It's to me, that's the most fascinating part of it. Not the government stuff, even though I wrote that book, I wrote Project Beta, but I was interested in that, and I knew a couple of the players, so
And we need to
that's
keep that in mind. That is a huge part of, the awareness people need to carry around that game does get played. I
yeah.
mean, if it's like I said in the intro, a cautionary tale that we need to hold close because so much of this may be manipulation, and it's impossible for people who don't have, the knowledge to be able to discern one from the other. It's interesting though that hermeneutical point you were making about like how art and UFO are very similar. To me, in my in my ruminations at night when I'm about to fall asleep or whatever, it almost seems like the UFO is milking our hermeneutical faculties. You know what I mean? Like the explosion of interpretation that happens around anomalous events, like art. To me, it almost seems like if the UFO is somehow a phenomenon of consciousness, and if consciousness is separate from us and more extant, then something about the process of interpretation and all of that may be like some kind of exquisite fuel for whatever the UFO energy is, and that's kind of like this silly quasi pseudo whatever tangents I get on, but I can't
Everything's on the
help but wonder
table.
that.
It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like there's almost it seems to crave the wonder that it inspires, and the process of inspiring that wonder within us creates these huge transformations in people's lives, and they
Well,
never
maybe
look.
that's communication to them.
Yeah, yeah,
Freaking us out is communication.
yeah,
you know um what's the UFO saying? It's like, well, what are we saying about it? That's what it's saying.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, like you said, it's not the event is not just the sighting. It's like the event is the reaction, the transformation, the sighting itself is only the initial trigger that sets the whole thing into motion.
Yeah,
Um,
and I don't know why people have these things, or they're chosen, or what. I think it may have something to do with synchronicity, or with um the way time is structured, or causality is structured, or who knows. Or
yeah,
maybe, like Whitley Strieber said, sometimes people just seem like beacons to them.
yeah, they can
you
sort of
know
see them in that consciousness ocean or whatever. They shine
yeah.
out.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's a them. I really have no idea. It's an it. There's something there. There's an initiating force,
Yeah.
But past that, I'm not sure what it is. And also, it's been around forever, as you and everybody listening knows. So we
Yeah.
react to it differently in different eras. And also, it seems to react to how we feel about ourselves. I talked to the late Chris O'Brien, was a good friend of mine, and he did a uh,
He's the cattle mutilation guy from
yeah.
San Juan. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. He we talked quite a bit. We were pretty good friends, and he said that he and David Perkins had done this survey of when there were UFO like increases in sightings and flaps, they're called. And he says, I don't know if this makes any sense, but it seemed to you in the United States, at least, he's found a correlation between people returning from military um, engagements, not during wars, not during anything like that. But he says when people came back from World War II, or people came back from the Vietnam War, or people came back from Afghanistan, he said, we saw an increase in UFO activity. It's like it's not because there's more people here. It's just a very small percentage of the population, and that
Yeah.
may be a correlation causation thing, and it doesn't really make any difference, or there is no correlation. But I thought that was
Interesting.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
mean, like
fascinating.
when tension is going away, because other people say it's when the world's in a tense situation, then you see more UFOs. I think it's almost the opposite. It's either before or after. You know, the
Yeah.
ghost rockets were right after World War II, weren't they? Or
Yeah,
maybe right before?
absolutely.
Yeah, right after. So
Well, and then Roswell, of course, after the bombs dropped. I mean, they didn't
yeah,
stop the bombs. They, you know,
yeah, and it was in New Mexico, right where the first bomb went off. In fact, not that far,
yeah, yeah. The
within a
Trinity
couple
site
hundred
was right there.
miles. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've not been to the Trinity site, but I've been to Roswell a few times, and the but yeah, the this has nothing to do with anything, but it's fascinating to me. When I was in Alamogordo, our host took us up to look at a petroglyph site that was like 10 miles from Trinity.
Hmm.
And I stood there looking at the petroglyphs and I said, wow, at 5:30 in the morning on, July, whatever it was, 1945, these petroglyphs were lit up by an atomic bomb flash, the first whatever. And I was like, I wonder what it would have been like to be standing here and just seeing those lit up like daylight petroglyphs, and just
Yeah.
that almost a Kubrickian moment of, throwing the bone in the air.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I had a really weird, like, what's that called? Wasn't really a spiritual experience, but just more like almost an uncanny experience of that the gulf between the culture that put those petroglyphs there and the other culture that came in, pushed them all out of the way, and set off this thing that could destroy us all. So
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah. And we're the same creatures, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
that's it's just like it's time and technology has changed, but we're still trying to make a mark on the planet.
Yeah,
Um,
and we still are, and so we'll see what happens. I don't know. I mean, after we get through all this, I don't know what's gonna. What's funny is in the last few years, there's, as far as I can tell, far less UFO sightings and far more discussion about them.
yeah. Well, that seems, I mean, that's kind of what my sense is as well. Like, I mean, I don't know that there's been a huge flap since, I mean, the New Jersey drone, if we count that, do you count that as a UFO flap? What are your thoughts on that? I mean,
I saw Tim Gallaudet speak
mhm,
a couple years ago. Was it last year? Anyway, it was at a small college in the east and in Pennsylvania. And somebody asked him about that, and it's funny. He said, for whatever motivation you think that Tim Gallaudet has as being a retired Navy admiral, he said, as far as he knew, that was um, testing, just to see, just to see. Oh, he said it was trying to detect nuclear material, or I mean, he alluded to that one rumor that
mhm,
there was something trying to figure out, can we find out if there's nuclear material somewhere, and can we just fly a drone up and detect it, possible, just to check for possible terrorist operations. He seemed to think that that's what it was, and I kind of think so too.
that would be useful. I mean, that would be a great skill for the government to have. You can see the value of
However,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
some of the sightings didn't look like drones at all, didn't act like drones at all, didn't fly like drones at all, didn't have the lights on like drones at all. So, as in a lot of these things, not everything fits.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, there's some anomalous stuff, even if most of it is accurately reported, and even the stuff that's not accurately reported, I think that can be taken into account too. But the point is that I don't know. I don't think those were UFOs. I do think those were something else going on, and also everybody sending up their own drones and all that. I have a pilot's license, so I have software that shows you where there's uh, flight
Planes.
restrictions,
Oh,
TFR,
okay. Okay.
temporary flight restrictions. I looked at New Jersey at that time. There were flight restrictions around every power plant, industrial facility, gas plant, petroleum distilling, every place in New Jersey and well, that whole area that had something to do with infrastructure all had flight restrictions around them. I've never seen that before. There were hundreds of them, all these little circles,
Hmm.
but the flight restrictions were for drones. It said up to 400 feet, which is drone height. I also have a drone license. It was up
Yeah.
to drone height, 400 feet above ground level and 400 feet from whatever the object is. And I'd never seen so many flight restrictions in one area at one time. It just
Yeah.
looked like somebody had thrown, pebbles at the map, and they're just everywhere.
Yeah.
I've never seen that before, and I haven't seen it since.
Was it a reaction to the drones being in the air, do you think, or was it some other,
I
did it?
think it would have to do with one, if they were testing something just to keep people away from it, and two,
Yeah.
just well, basically the same thing, getting people to stop flying drones around so that they don't have these other things flying in the air, one causing problems and hazards, and two maybe causing false positives, and three maybe they weren't drones from United States citizens. I don't know.
Yeah.
They didn't want all those things in the air while something else was being tested, or they just wanted to put restrictions around them and see what showed up.
Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah. So strange. All of that was just so bizarre. I mean, because it seems like for the uninitiated, and you probably know more because you're a drone pilot and a regular pilot, but like just follow them back to wherever they are. I mean, like even if they're anomalous, you're going to see them do something anomalous at the end of the journey if they are going to disappear or do something else. How hard could it be? But apparently it was inordinately difficult because it was never done that we know
Yeah,
of.
yeah, and if it
Um,
was some official operation, by law you have to have lights on that make it visible to other aircraft.
mhm.
I think for 3 miles. Uh, but if it's somebody contractor, the government, they don't have to follow those rules. They can just be flying around and shut the lights off if they want. Because they have radar, and they also have ADSB, which is something that it goes in every airplane now, and it shows you where all other. You don't even need radar anymore. It shows you where all other airplanes are, anything in the air, where it's going, how fast, what direction, all that stuff. So it's basically collision avoidance to
Yeah.
keep aircraft separated. Um, but these things may have not even had ADSB on them. I don't know.
Yeah.
Uh, but like I said, it's just it. I don't think in aggregate it has anything to do with actual UFOs. I think it was some sort of operation, and if people wanted to think they were UFOs, whoever's doing the operation was fine with that.
Of course, because that's cover for what everything they might be actually be doing.
Yeah,
Um, One of the rabbit holes that I've fallen into, and a lot of people have, is obviously Carl Jung's work on archetypes and those sorts of things. Um, uh, Bernardo Kastrup wrote a book recently about his own daimonic experience, where he felt like he's had a daimon through his life who's helped push him toward particular things, and it's helped him to manifest particular archetypes and whatnot. Um, to me, that sort of resonates with your idea about the hermeneutical nature of the phenomenon and of the human mind. Do you think that the idea of archetypes existing in the broader consciousness sphere and a daimonic reality fits with what we're seeing in the UFO phenomenon, or how those two might relate? What are your thoughts on that whole take around? ufology.
When I haven't read Kastrup's book,
Okay.
but when I hear about it and when I try to apply that, it seems like we're using our own tools and what we have available to us to be able to understand this substrate of reality uh, in a way that makes sense to us, in a way that makes us able to think about it, in a way that it makes us able to um, accept it, move forward, and ask more questions about it. Uh, and when he talks about a daemon helping him or following him or whatever, that's completely within the tradition of esotericism. And but I think I haven't experienced this, but I think it's a useful model. And if that's the reality or the model that somebody uses to understand their experience, I think it's valid. I mean, you're going to use any tool that you have. The only problem is becoming too, what's the word? If you become too involved with or dependent on that model for always and forever, it sounds like what he was talking about. It's like I didn't even realize it till later, and it was a useful model for him to help understand how this subject has impacted his life. I hate to speak for him, and I haven't read the book, but from other people I've talked to in other accounts, it just sounds like you will use what you have available to you to help you integrate a strange experience or to learn more about something that is so non-specific as this, where it's coming from. The minute you assign aliens to it, I think you've already lost 50% of your ability uh, to understand it or to have your output, sorry, your outlook and your research methodology and all that, um, it suffers. uh, and that's why I try. I'm sorry I'm not answering this directly, but what
No, it's all
yeah,
useful.
what I try to do for myself, my model is, I was going to say this earlier. One of my very important models is my friend Shannon Taggart, who is a photographer and has done photography at seances. Um, I asked her once, I said, what do you think is the reality behind this? And she said, um, I take this seriously, but not literally. And I think that's a really good, one of a number of really good models to use when studying UFOs. I take it seriously, but not literally. I do the same thing with the government stuff. I take what they say seriously. What are they doing with this? But I don't take it literally.
Yeah.
There's no way for me to check on this stuff.
Yeah.
There's no way for most people to check on it.
Hmm.
So the idea is to listen, look, listen, and remember, and then next day, the next week, 10 years down the line, you may get confirmation of something that you heard. I've had stuff, I can't think of anything right now, but I've had stuff told to me by government people when I used to talk to them 20 years ago, and it's becoming relevant now.
Hmm.
It's
And
just
it bore out ultimately.
not the reality of it, like there's actually UFOs here, but more like why they were doing what they were doing, and where they were doing it, and when the context of it and all that provided context to me. It's not. Um, I'm trying to think of what I'm trying to say. I listen to everything. I believe nothing, and I try to catalog that in my mind so that someday I may make a connection that's important to me
Yeah.
and that I might be able to communicate to others. And if they've had the same experience or have a data point that matches that, we can talk.
Yeah. I think it's interesting what you're describing, and I think that a lot of people have described the same sort of thing. But the confusion that people have is that what kind of journey are we on? Are we on a journey to use the UFO subject to grow ourselves and to kind of like,
Yeah.
find the center of our being or whatever else? Or are we trying to convince the world that we are right now and we've always been right and get vindicated? I mean, if you're looking for the external side of that, then you're emotionally dependent upon proving to other people that there's reality behind the UFO phenomenon. If you're looking at it for yourself as kind of a spiritual or existential seeker, then you can revel in all of the detail and the whole miracle of all of it because it's informing something about your own personal, condition. And I
Yeah.
think that that's a a beautiful thing that we need to kind of recognize in ourselves so that we can, identify our own personal motives and figure out what we're trying to accomplish by all this.
Yeah.
Because, um, yeah, I don't know, seems
There's
important.
a I think there's a book that's waiting to be written about UFOs as a spiritual journey and as a spiritual. They have been actually, but just not directly like this.
Yeah,
And like UFOs saved my sanity.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Saved my life. I saw Valet speak a few years ago, and he was talking about he had investigated something and it turned out it was a hoax. And he says, "Well, it was a hoax. I'm sorry. I wanted to not be, but it was a hoax."
Yeah,
But he showed some of the pictures of the hoax and all that. And he said, "This is not the UFOs that we love." And that I've taken that as my friends and I now use that. If somebody comes on the scene
hmm,
and they're obviously ego, like, we're going to get to the bottom of this and I'm going to tell you what's going on. And we just, our first question is, do they love the UFO? If they don't love the UFO, then we're less likely to listen to them. And
yeah,
it's almost a metaphor. But the
yeah,
thing is, like, if you love the UFO, then your ego is not entwined in it. And I've talked to my friend David Metcalf and I talked about this a lot. It's like if you're if you love the UFO, if your ego is not so connected to it, it is going to reveal more to you
yeah,
just
absolutely.
just by not, dictating what you want to hear.
Yeah,
Because it's if you don't dictate what you want to hear, it'll tell you things you never realized or never thought you could ask or never even thought to ask. And that pushes you in different directions. Maybe that's another connection to the cult training I was talking about that you asked about. I mean,
yeah. That's so fascinating. And again, it goes back to that connection to a work of art, If you approach this as, what with no
what
limits.
resonates? Yeah.
Yeah, what resonates, what arises in me as a result of this interaction, then there's no limit to what you can get. But if you are like, where's the proof for the theory that I have, then you're very, myopic and you're not going to
Yeah.
find half of the truth within.
Yeah.
That's so
Most of the
cool.
people that are my close friends that I talk to about this, they have that attitude. Their ego is not involved in it. They have a sense of humor about it. We're constantly cracking jokes about it.
Yeah,
Um, and behind their backs, people in it, just gentle jokes. We're not vicious.
yeah,
And it's just, it's the best hobby I could ever have. But then it pushes into other areas. I I've gotten to meet so many cool people and seen so many nice things and had so many great experiences just because of my interest in it.
yeah.
I went to the Sol conference in Italy last year and I just made it into a vacation. I was in Italy for like, I think 18 or 20 days, but the
Wow.
conference was only 3 days of it
Yeah, yeah.
because there was parts of Italy I'd never been to. I never went to northern Italy that much, so I went to Turin, and there's a huge UFO archive there. And Eduardo Russo, who basically has been studying UFOs in Italy, he's like he is basically has run MUFON in Italy, their version of it, since probably the 1960s. So he's been around forever, and he showed me this huge archive of probably millions of books and pamphlets and magazines and everything having to do with the UFO subject from all over the world, but mostly Europe, obviously, because that's where they are.
Yeah,
But they had everything. And while I was there, I went to see the Shroud of Turin, church, and I went to this Egyptian museum. And after the Sol conference, I went and saw Massimo and my friend Susan near Bologna, and I went to see some art that Peter Weller had actually said I should go see, the actor.
yeah, yeah, totally.
He's not a friend, but I asked him a question about like how does the UFO? I mean, no, sorry. How does your acting and the fact that you have a PhD in art history connect? What's the connection there? And
Yeah,
he took 15 minutes to answer the question. It was
no,
it was in a group of people,
yeah,
and he said, "You should go see the Scrovegni Chapel in Padua. It's the basis of as some people said, it's the basis of all visual art since then. It was completed in 1305 by Giotto, and I'd never seen it. So I took a train up to Padua, and I walked over to the chapel, and I took a look at it, and I was stunned.
Yeah.
Um, but this is all a result of being interested in the UFO subject, and so I've made the best friends. I've seen the coolest stuff. Uh, I've talked to people that are, total historical. Jim Mosley, who used to publish Saucer Smear, he was a friend of mine, so I could ask him what happened with Adamski in 1958, and he could tell me. I talked to John Keel regularly, huge hero of mine.
Oh yeah,
He
yeah,
told me all kinds of cool stuff, which I wish I'd written down.
yeah.
It's just how do I used to read his and Valet too. I mean, a few times I've met with him and talked to him, and I was like, my God, I used to read his books when I was a kid.
Hmm.
So it's apart from the subject itself, it's just so fulfilling as something to do with your life rather than, I don't want to prove anything to anybody personally. Um, I want to, what do I want to do? I want to learn things, and I want that curiosity and whatever I found to go to other people, and then they can take it further. You
Yeah.
know, I think
I
it's great. I don't care if we never know what UFOs are. I really don't, and if I don't think we will.
that's an enlightened answer, and I have to say that I join you on all of that. I've had the last 3 years. I mean, I'm a journalist by trade, and I've interviewed people my whole career, and I've had the best conversations over the past 3 years on this show than I've ever had leading up to it. And they cover the gamut of existential issues that I've always held close, but never was really able to engage with folks on a regular basis. And I have explored all kinds of territory that I never would have had it been had I not stumbled into this rabbit hole. So
Yeah,
it's
impinges on
transformational.
so many other things.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I mean, like you find one topic, one wrinkle of the subject, and that leads to another, to another. I mean, we're talking about esotericism, talking about high physics, science, all of it just kind of is included in this gigantic bag, and it's
Yeah,
just a wonderful
and like
subject.
Diana Pasolka said, the smartest people in the room believe something's going on.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
it's not the
Exactly.
crazy people. It's the people that are truly curious and truly inquiring and you know truly want the data to lead them to wherever it's going to go instead of stick their own idea on it and then just hold on to it and say this is what it is. The
Yeah.
smartest people are going to say what is this and what do we do about it and how do we think about it. And that's why I'm more interested in talking to academics about this now. And that article, for whatever you think about it, the New York Times article by Leslie Keane and Ralph Blumenthal,
Mhm.
whatever you think about it, whatever you think the motivation was behind it and the fallout of it, the best thing about it is that it basically crowdsourced UFO research
Oh yeah. Yeah,
and made it
absolutely.
respectable and made it, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have been in Italy. I wouldn't have gone to Germany last month for the Society for UAP Studies conference. All
I
of that
wouldn't be
as a
hosting the
result.
show.
Yeah,
I mean that,
exactly.
yeah, it just exploded.
Yeah. So apart from the government stuff, I mean, I think people ask me why I think it happened. I said, well, I think there was some kind of operation where they needed, people to think about UFOs again in a certain way. But the thing is, it's metastasized, and now it's, what we see now, where it's not
Yeah.
an embarrassing thing to talk about, and it's not something that'll get your tenure taken away or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful because I was just waiting for the time when I said with people with beards and degrees and whatever you want to talk about would talk about this seriously because they all did it in secret for a long time. That the Invisible College, and
Yeah.
it's not invisible anymore. I think there's a group called the Visible College at this point.
Yeah, and they are some of the brightest minds in the world are entrenched,
Yeah,
which I think is
you should have some of these people on Stephen Finley, Kevin Knuth.
I've had
You know,
both.
really, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
they're both great. They're both friends of mine, and I talked every time I talk to them. It's like they're friends and they're wonderful people, but I'm always learning something from them.
Yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah.
always some new thing that I didn't know about.
And those two in particular have such a wide view of the topic. Like they're coming from different directions, but complementary, and they create. It's just I mean, that's
Yeah, I
what I
mean,
like about the tour of the show is like being able to sort of check in with folks who have been thinking about it for years and just they
yeah.
unload this wisdom that is
And Jeff Krebel was
profound.
my gateway drug to these people. I mean, he introduced me to these people. Well, Kevin, I think I met somewhere else, but Steve Finley, who Diana, I met actually on my own, and it turned out they were friends. He and Jeff were friends. I mean, she and Jeff were friends. Um, uh, who else? Greg Egesian.
Who I
I met
haven't
through
talked
this.
to.
Yeah, you
I'd
should
like
have
to.
him on.
Yeah.
He's wonderful. He's such a friendly, great sense of humor, really knowledgeable. It's but and then there's other academics I know that don't really want their names out there yet, but I've learned more in the last 6 or 7 years than I did in the previous 20
Yeah.
about the subject because these people are asking questions that nobody's asked.
Hmm.
I think I was at the last Archives of the Impossible conference, and Hussein Agrama, who's from the University of Chicago, he got up and talked about. He said, "How do everybody's talking about uh, where do we come from? How do we look at this? What uh, analogies do we have from history?" He said the thing I remember that he said was, "You remember those magic eye pictures in the 90s or whatever it
Yeah.
was, where you'd have
Where
to
you would
stare at it for a while until
suddenly it locks in and the thing pops out. Yeah, yeah.
He said we need something like that with UFO study. We've been staring at it for so long and it's just this jumble, and there's something in our perception that needs to be changed where a new pattern will reveal itself."
Yeah.
And he said, to your point earlier about spiritual study, about esotericism, he says, I think part of that lies in spiritual practices that we either don't have forgotten about, or forgot how useful they could be in certain contexts. It's like, what if you start meditating? What if you start doing Tai Chi or something like that? That those things may be part of the key when you change your perception and change and open up your perceptions. Maybe the magic, the magic
Yeah.
eye pattern will reveal itself. At least it will reveal itself to you in a way that you can push forward with your understanding, and then other people's too, if you let them know about it.
Yeah,
So
that leads me to probably my last question. I'm about done here, but it's kind of personal. Where have you arrived in terms of your ontology? And if you're willing to talk about your own spiritual thinking, do you, what kind of practices do you use to access your own, spiritual side? And does it relate to your study of the UFOs and how?
yeah, well, at the beginning, I think the Western esoteric stuff helped me out a lot. One, it helped. What it did was make me realize the next thing I wanted to do, which was my friends and I put together a magazine. Um, and to me, that was like going to college for almost 10 years, but it was just studying UFOs.
That was the excluded middle. Is that the,
Yes,
yeah.
I talked to so many people. Nobody ever refused an interview, which kind of stunned me. Um, but talking to all those people was just like learning a whole new language and a whole like, I had a certain idea about the subject from reading books from when I was a kid, and these people expanded it so much. Jim Mosley did, and Dean Radin did, and Joe McMoneagle did, and God, I can't remember everybody we talked to. Carla Turner, um, and I think just opening up to that was the first part of it, and that led to writing Project Beta. And after that, it led to writing other things and examining this in different ways and looking at the ontological, spiritual, philosophical side of this. And for that part of it, I think the the Eastern practice, the Buddhism, the Zen part really helped because it kept me also reading the books of Robert Anton Wilson, who also became a
Yes.
friend,
Yeah.
and his idea about ontological agnosticism. Like,
Cosmic
don't,
Triggers is one of my favorite
yeah,
books.
yep, mine too. Yeah, I ended up meeting him, talking to him, and then became like sort of friends. I could go up and say hi to him. I visited him a couple of times,
Oh, that's so
um,
cool.
which was mind blowing to me. Uh, but that ontological agnosticism combined with the Zen idea about not getting attached to things and not being emotional about things, and I think that's objective as I can get. You know, I will be subjective when I want to be. I mean, art is very subjective,
Mhm.
but not having not having that stickiness about what I should be interested in or what I should believe in or anything like that. It opened up so much because I know people. I've known so many people that not so many, but friends of mine, people I've known have fallen by the wayside. It's like, oh, I can't take this anymore. You know, you don't realize how much the government knows and how they're kind of trying to control us and all. It's like I have no control over any of that stuff. All I can have control over is how I feel about it and what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
And the fact that you will talk to me or any other podcast or anybody will talk to me on my podcast, um, that to me is I don't know about a validation, but that detachment from whatever this might be to me is like my little skeleton key of um, moving forward because I've learned so much just by not really caring about any specific point of view.
Yeah.
You know, the only point of view I care about is the one that brings more understanding and makes people more me and other people more knowledgeable and hopefully more interested and ultimately happier. What's the whole goal? My mother used to chastise me a lot. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And finally, I just told her one day, I said, do you care if I'm happy or not? You never asked me that. And she kind of stopped and went, oh, um, but that's the ultimate goal. Like, stay interested, stay engaged, talk to people, interact with people. My favorite thing is just talking to people about this and throwing those ideas around. That's why I did my show. That's why I'm bringing it back. That's why I write. That's why I'm talking to you right now.
Yeah.
Why not? You know, connection
Well,
is a big thing, and if we can connect over this totally weird thing that used to be made fun of and is now suddenly respectable, quote unquote, I think that's
yeah.
wonderful because like
Yeah.
you said, it brings up so many questions and brings in so many subjects, and it turns you into, if you really want to understand this, you have to turn into kind of a polymath.
Exactly right. And you have the kinds of conversations that we never have anymore. I mean, like people don't have these kinds of conversations outside of the subject unless they're in a church or something like that. Like you deep, existentially important conversations about, who we are, what we want, all of
Yeah,
that.
not
And
yeah, not normal in the normal course of life in public life, especially in the United States. No, they don't.
yeah,
And
exactly.
it's
Yeah.
disappearing too. The
Yeah.
internet ruined me for reading. I'm still trying to get back to actually reading books properly. I used to read 4 or 5 books at a time.
Yeah.
Now I'm lucky if I can read one in a month.
I read a lot, but it's on a device, which I kind of, but the books are so much cheaper on Kindle, so a lot of
Oh no,
times
no,
I'm,
I do that too. My late
yeah.
wife, she said no more books at one point because we had so many books, and then she was getting a PhD, so she had all these books.
Oh my
Strangely
gosh.
enough, she was getting a degree in mythological studies, and
Oh,
Jeff
that's so
Kripal
cool.
came to speak at her school, and I already knew Jeff. And then her professor started asking me about UFOs. It was, you know, it was
That's awesome.
a Pacifica Graduate Institute, which is basically it turns out Jungian analysts and mythological people with mythological studies degrees.
Wow.
So they suddenly got interested in UFOs, in 2017. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, yeah.
At
Along with
least
everyone else.
publicly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have one more question to ask, and this was put to me by one of my patrons on Discord. He goes by Captain Mark. I'm not sure of his last name on the surface, but he says that and he was a friend. So he basically says that at Contact in the Desert a few years ago, there was Mac Tony's ghost or something appeared, or
It
and he
appeared
wondered.
in somebody's cell phone picture.
Wow. So
Or
what are your thoughts on that? I mean, he knows that you know Mac Tony's, and he was a friend of Mac Tony's, and so
oh,
I
okay.
think he wants me to preface it with Mac Tony's was fabulous. Everyone, if they haven't read his books, they should. Um, but anyway, just wondered if you what your thought on that was.
I was sitting in the lobby and Whitley Strieber actually came in with a phone and he said, "Who does that look like?" And he showed me the picture and I looked at it for a second. I said, "Looks like Mac." And it didn't look exactly like it. It was just it was a something that appeared in a photo supposedly that somebody had taken there at the conference during a talk. I don't
Yeah,
even think it was during his talk. I can't remember what it was. But I
yeah.
just looked at it and I said, "Yeah, it looks like Mac." And he said, "Yeah, it does, doesn't it? I wonder what that's for." And then he had me on his show and we talked about it for like an hour and a half.
That's why he said this because you guys yeah, you had a show with Whitley talking about it.
Yeah. And at that point, I mean, when that kind of thing happens, I don't want to get binary about it. Like, was
Right.
that Mac or was it not?
Yeah, yeah.
That's not the question. The question
Yeah,
is, what is the significance of this happening right now and us being interested in it? You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
maybe somewhere in the streams of time or something, Mac's consciousness is around and he just wanted to say, "Hey, I'm still watching." I mean, that that could be true. And
yeah,
I don't know if it is. I don't even know if it's likely, but it makes me happy.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
And
why
it's
not? I still miss Mac. I talked to him a lot. We were good. We were going to write a book together, and then he died suddenly. We
yeah,
were already starting to write it. We were like putting together chapters and stuff.
what a loss. I mean, early visionary
Yeah.
ultra-terrestrials. I think that that has a lot to do with where we're ultimately, John Keel's idea of these personalities that may be outside of our reality, but interceding. That's pretty much all I had for you. Thank you for a fantastic conversation. It's been such a pleasure conversing with you.
Oh, same here. I mean, I feel like I rambled a couple times, but that's
Well,
how
when you,
I'm
it's valuable,
discursive
man.
sometimes when I talk. So